Jared here with CarBuzz.com, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 2019 Acura NSX. Very special review I have for you here today. So Acura decided to bring back the legendary NSX name after a very long development that took almost 10 years. 2 Super Bowl commercials, teasers, prototypes, blah, 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 blah. It finally arrived in 2017 as the car's second generation. Now, when they introduced this version of the NSX, they actually changed what those letters stood for. Back in the 90s, NSX stood for New Sports Car Experimental. It was meant to take a sports car and make it more livable and reliable every day. It's the reason why your Ferrari doesn't break every time you go to start it up now. Now, this car stands for New Sports Car Experience. They've changed it a little bit. Acura wants to redefine what a sports car is, what it's like to live with, and they've done that with the use of hybrid technology, much like how Porsche, McLaren, and Ferrari revolutionized hypercars with the P1, 918, and LaFerrari. This car is looking to do the same at a much lower price point. At its price point, the NSX is going to compete against cars like the Audi R8, the McLaren 570S, and then that BMW i8 that I mentioned, and its own rival from Japan, the Nissan GTR. So does the Acura NSX have the goods to live up with those legendary names? That's what we're going to find out today. And if you want more information about the NSX and to see our full written review, check the link in the description below for our links to CarBuzz.com to see the full review and get more information about the car. So before we get it out on the road, let's talk about what makes this NSX tick, starting with what's out back. Despite its Acura badge, this car was designed and built in the United States. So this is actually an all-American supercar, although Japan did have a little bit to do with the development. Now, the woman who styled it, I think she did a pretty good job. This car is extremely striking and it does draw a lot of attention. I've gotten so many thumbs up this week driving this car. I think the front end is a little bit better now with the 2019 update. They got rid of that silver beak in the front. It's all blacked out now, and the jeweled headlights are absolutely gorgeous. You do get the same on like a TLX, RLX, but the rear is where I really like this car. I think it's simple, it's plain, which is what an NSX should be. It shouldn't go out of its way to look overly ridiculous. It does have a big spoiler here, but it's not a super ridiculous raised one like you get on like an STI. It is, of course, made of gloss carbon fiber. And I do like this bar that goes across here, kind of like an old school 911 in that respect. And so if I go ahead and open this up, it does have a button here. It's a little hard to find. You will get used to it after a little while. I didn't think there was an exterior trunk release, but there it is. That is Acura's twin turbocharged V6 engine. So by itself, it produces 500 horsepower and 406 foot-pounds of torque. Those are pretty stout numbers. The only thing I don't like about it is it doesn't really sound that good. There are a lot better sounding cars like the Audi R8 and the McLaren in this class, but the engine itself is simply miraculous. It lives under this very expensive carbon fiber engine cover, and you do get a little plaque here saying what build number your car is. Now, of course, this V6 engine isn't the only thing propelling this car forward. There is an additional electric motor back here that is mated between the engine and the 9-speed dual clutch transmission. That's what gives you that extra kick. When you shift, it punches you through and there is no gap in the delivery of torque. But this isn't the only electric motor, so we're gonna go back up front and talk about what lives up there, because it ain't a frunk. So coming back up front, on a mid-engine car is where you normally expect to find the trunk, but the NSX is quite a bit different. Once I undo the latch here, you're just gonna see a bunch of wires and gears and all sorts of stuff, and you might wonder what the heck all of this stuff is. So what it is a battery pack and 2 electric motors, one for each wheel. So that's gonna handle the torque vectoring. It's gonna yank you around corners using electric power. Basically, the NSX has the capability of sending more power to either of the wheels to help you get around corners. And these electric motors also provide a little bit of a boost. So in addition to the twin turbo V6, these add about 73 horsepower and 76 foot-pounds of torque. So your total output is 573 horsepower and 476 foot-pounds of torque. That is a whole heck of a lot more than you get from a BMW i8, although this is a little more expensive than an i8. Now, the only difference is this is not a plug-in hybrid system like the i8. So you can plug in the i8 and drive it for about 20 or so miles on electric only. This car will drive on electric only, but you can't really like go to the store without kicking on the motor. That's a little disappointing. I think this car would have been a little bit more livable if Acura had decided to make it a plug-in, but that doesn't change the way it drives, which is excellent. So let's go ahead and get it out on the road. Now, before I get moving, I want to just talk about some of the differences between this 2019 NSX and a 2018 or 17 model, because they did do some minor tweaks and changes. A lot of it's tuning, so they changed the steering, they changed the suspension, and they made some changes in the software for the hybrid setup. So all of that, plus new Continental Sport Contact 6 tires. That's the biggest change there, which you can technically make on your 2017 or 2018 model, but that's the biggest change. All of that results in this car being 2 seconds faster around a lap of the Suzuka circuit in Japan. So they also added a new thermal orange exterior. They added this new blue leather interior. You can get a more extended red leather interior, and all of that is going to come at around $1,500 more than last year's model, but you do get $4,700 worth of options in here. You get parking sensors for free now, you get navigation for free, you get this 4-way power seats, which were optional before. You can also get manual seats for a no-cost option. I don't know why you'd want to do that. And you get these awesome speakers. The ELS Studio really bumps, although if you're driving a supercar, you kind of want to hear the engine and stuff like that. But if you're just cruising around, stereo is awesome. And those Sport Contact 6 tires, those can also be replaced with Pirelli P0 Trofeo R tires if you are going to track this car a lot. Those are the more aggressive tire. So I'm going to start off, I have it in quiet mode. So if I just pull away and I don't give it too much gas, the car will run on its electric motors alone. Now, you really can't do any real driving like that, which is a bit disappointing. One of the changes that I think Acura should make to this car, if they're going to do, people want like a Type R version or a convertible or whatever. The only thing I think they should do is make this a plug-in hybrid with bigger batteries. That would be really good. You could drive this car on electric only. I actually really liked it because it's nice and peaceful and serene. You can have a phone call, but you really can't do that for very long. So we're not going to do it. This is the last time we're going to be in quiet mode. I'm going to go ahead and put it in sport mode, which is its default setting. That's what you start off in when you start the car, although you can program it differently if you don't want to wake your neighbors. Now I'm going to go ahead and twist it into Sport Plus mode because I'm going to show you how fast all of these electric motors and V6 engines combine to create an amazing experience. So we're going through some turns now. This thing corners unlike any other supercar, sports car, anything that you've ever driven because of those electric motors that live up front. It pulls you through the turns unlike anything, but it lets you get sideways if you want. The brakes, they have regen in there, which is pretty cool. You don't feel it working too much unless you're really pushing the car, and when you pull out of a corner, it comes with a ferocity, but it's still really comfortable. And I have it in Sport Plus mode, which is its second most aggressive setting, and this road is not actually that smooth, but it still feels incredibly comfortable. And no matter what gear you're in, we're in D5 now, there we go, it kicked down to 3, and it pulls, and those shifts are handled so quickly from this 9-speed dual clutch automatic, and whew, wow, we just hit some pretty high speeds there. I'm going to go ahead and put it back into sport mode while I talk a little bit here. I don't think Acura has been given enough credit on this 9-speed dual clutch transmission. This is one of the best transmissions on the market right now. It's up there with the PDKs and the McLaren and the Ferrari gearboxes of the world. As an automatic, it shifts so smoothly. I've taken my mom out for a ride in this car, and she usually gets annoyed when I drive fast and the car is really jerky, but even if I push this button here to put it in the manual mode and I take over the shifting manually, it still shifts so smoothly. It doesn't rock the car as you do in other cars with either an automatic or a dual clutch. I'm going to go ahead and shift now. Super quick. Yeah, this transmission, whether you're driving it as an automatic or whether or not you're doing crazy stuff like I just did, great transmission, really quick. And the thing that makes it even better is all of that torque from the electric motor. So in a normal car, when you pull the paddle or when it shifts by itself, you feel a slight delay. You feel this car is just constantly. There is no gap, no delay in the power. And that's because when the engine isn't working, which is during a shift, the electric motor is filling in the gaps. So the engine goes, when it goes for that shift, the electric motor, it puts all of its power in there and you get instant response, instant torque. It feels like an electric car. It feels like the car is never letting you down, like it's never giving you, like it's never not giving you all of its power. And you saw I was taking it through some corners there. This car, its straight line speed is pretty damn impressive, but nowhere near as impressive as how well it goes through corners. And that's because of Acura's super handling all-wheel drive system, or SH-AWD as I like to call it. Not exactly the catchiest name. I think Acura should have renamed this. Instead of SH-AWD, it should have been something like Magic Steer, because I like to describe it as, you know, when you were a kid and you used to play with your toy cars and you used to twist them around the carpet, like no car could actually turn like that. Well, this one can. Basically what it'll do is it'll use one of the electric motors, because it has two, one for each wheel. If you're turning, it'll send extra torque to the outside wheel and it'll kind of push you around as you're doing, like with your finger, like on a toy car. Other cars just cannot do this. Not a McLaren, not an Audi R8, nothing else can do what this car can do. And that's just talking about this car in a bend. In a straight line, it also really helps a lot. So I'm gonna go ahead, when we come up to the next stop, I'm going to do launch control in this car. So the way that works is pretty simple. I'm gonna go ahead and explain it. We've got this really easy to use shifter. So I'm gonna go ahead and first put it into Sport Plus mode, which is the second most aggressive setting. To put it into track mode, you have to turn it once again and hold it for a few seconds. You'll hear the beep, and now track mode is engaged. So I don't suggest you do this lightly, because track mode turns off the traction control. So this may be an all-wheel drive car, but trust me, you can get it sideways really easily, especially with the traction control off. So now that we're in track mode, when we come to a stop, doing a launch control is incredibly easy. It takes almost no steps. You just put your left foot on the brake, right foot on the throttle, and release. Oh! There is no other word other than, I'm sorry, my editor Kelso is gonna have to bleep that out, because holy damn, this car is fast. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in its Sport Plus setting. But if you did that right, 0 to 60 happens in about 3 seconds. So I've seen some outlets post as low as 2.7, and I've seen some outlets post as high as around 3.2. But 3 seconds is what Acura told me this car should hit for 0 to 60. There are very few cars at any price range that are going to be able to do 0 to 60 that quick and scare the living daylights out of your passenger or your cameraman in this case. So, and that's not even what Acura really designed this car for. And I think that Acura actually could have made this car even quicker to 0 to 60. 0 to 60 is, a thing that sells cars, but when you launch the car, it only revs to about 2,000 RPM. Some launch control systems will let you dump it from like a really high RPM. This one does it really easy. It's easy, it's repeatable. It really doesn't beat up the drivetrain when you do launch control, which is such an interesting feat in this car. What it does was, you might have heard this when I launched it, it uses the electric motors first because they have the instant torque. So you hear and then you hear the engine. It's kind of weird how it does that. I've really not experienced that in any other car because it's relying on that low down electric motor first. So as far as driving it, I've never driven the 2017 or 2018 versions of this car. I've heard the differences are very minute and you'd have to drive them back to back to really feel the difference. But when this car first came out, people just said, oh, it feels artificial, it feels kind of fake in the steering. I'm not getting that at all. This thing is an absolute savage. The steering, you have to put almost no inputs to make it turn. I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in its Sport Plus mode. I don't know if you can tell from the video, but like I barely have to move the wheel to make this car go around turns. It's such a short ratio lock to lock that I absolutely adore the steering. It may not have like the most feel and feedback. It does feel a little bit artificial, but not in a bad way. If it was different at all, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of this car's insane speed. So, as I said at the beginning of this video, no, this NSX is not like the original, but that's not a bad thing. The NSX name was designed to change what we think about sports cars, what we think about the supercar, and this car does that. I've never driven anything that made me feel like such a good driver. I know that this car is doing all the work for me, but I feel like a freaking rock star, man. I am the best driver in the world. I am Sebastian Vettel. I am Lewis Hamilton in this car. This is turning me into the greatest driver in the world. Whether or not I deserve to be, that's up to you. But from behind the wheel of the NSX, I feel like a driver's champion. And some people, I've seen the comments on the internet about this car about how Ayrton Senna would be rolling in his grave because this car doesn't have a manual and it's not normally aspirated and blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? New Formula One cars aren't manual. New Formula One cars aren't normally aspirated. And you know what? I don't see too many people complaining that Formula One drivers are wimps because they don't drive stick shift race cars. And with that in mind, I adore the driving experience of this car. And then I'm gonna go ahead and drop it back into quiet mode, turn on the ELS Studio amazing stereo, and I can drive this car on the highway all day long and get 25 mpg. It is such a great daily driver car. Unlike the Ferraris and even the Porsche GT2 RSs and GT3 RSs of the world, I sure hope that whoever buys this car isn't just gonna park it, because there's zero pretense with the NSX. Some people don't know what it is, but they love hearing about it when you introduce it to them. And I will say that the values of these haven't been doing so well on the used market, so you could probably go in and get one of these at a good discount or get a used one for an amazing steal. So just go and put the miles on it. Don't put it in your garage. Don't, try and keep the miles low and only drive it on special occasions and blah, 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 blah. No. Go out and drive this car. Go out and use it because it can. I have plenty of headroom. It's so comfortable. In its quiet mode on the highway, this car is beautiful. And even over the of pavement, it won't punish you. Getting in and out of it, that's a different story. But this interior is very nice. We're going to go ahead and pull over now because although this car is incredibly comfortable to drive, it's not without its faults. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this car over so we can do a deep dive on this interior, because while it is very good, it's far from perfect. So now that we're pulled over, let's go ahead and talk about the interior. I don't want to spend an enormous amount of time in here, but it is important because this is where you're going to be sitting driving the car. So let's start off with the steering wheel. It is one of the coolest steering wheels I've experienced. It has just really nice grips on the back of the wheel, really holds your hands in place. I wish the paddles were column mounted. I do prefer column mounted shifters, but for steering wheel mounted units, these are very big and very easy to touch, as are the controls here. You can control different menus here. You don't get like too much in terms of customizability, but you can have your oil life, your tire pressure, all that kind of stuff, your MPG, all in that little center screen. It's pretty cool, and we do have some additional carbon fiber on this interior that's wrapped all around the steering wheel, which looks really cool. We also have the new blue interior with the Alcantara inserts. I dig it. I really like it. I find it hard to believe that this was a super highly requested option, because I wouldn't have thought of it as an owner, but it is unique. I don't see a lot of other cars with blue leather, so I would totally opt for this interior. The only thing that I don't love about the interior is the materials are all excellent. This is all leather. This is really nice Alcantara suede. There's some plastic, but like it's really well done plastic. The thing that I don't like is there's not a lot of cohesiveness to this design. You see, here's Alcantara, here's sort of a black glossy finish, here's a silver metal, here's a different silver plastic, here's a different gray plastic. Too many materials going on at once. So it's not exactly cohesive like an Audi R8 or a 911 or even a McLaren, but that doesn't stop it from being extremely premium interior. We have this optional Alcantara headliner, which really makes it feel even more premium. The seats, wonderful. They do hold you in, but they're not like aggressive sport buckets. You can get manual ones, not sure why you would, but I could spend a lot of time in this car, and that is not true of a lot of supercars. They are heated, no ventilation or anything silly like that, but I want to give Acura props. These are some of the best seats you'll find on a supercar. So let's talk about the infotainment real quick, because it's a disaster. Acura and Honda have this system in other cars. It's kind of the same as what you'll find in a Civic or an Accord, whatever, but it doesn't have a volume knob, which is a little bit annoying. Most Hondas for 2019 do have one now, but this one is one of the lone holdouts. Not sure why Acura decided that its most Halo product doesn't get the best infotainment system. Other than that, the navigation is excellent. It's really darn good, really quick, very easy to use, but the system itself is super laggy. Like you see, oh my God, trip computer, there we go. Finally, it's there. If you do care, this car will average about 21 or 22 mpg when the engine does kick on. Before that, it was running silently on electric mode. If you want to, hypermile it, I've gotten about 26 mpg at best. When I was driving like a lunatic, about 12 mpg. You've got your dynamic control mode that I talked about. When you do that, I just put it in quiet mode. That shut the engine off. You do get a little bit different gauge cluster. It does change the way this center screen works. Sport mode is the default. Sport Plus, and then hold this over to the right. Beep. That's going to go ahead and put it in track mode. Blacks out the screen so that you're not distracted, because trust me, you need to be focused when driving this car in track mode. So let's go ahead and put it back in quiet, which will shut it up. Now, climate control is very small, very compact, very simple. The biggest problem is there is no fan speed control. I like to control my fan speed, and to do that, you have to push climate, and then you have to do it digitally here on the screen. That's really annoying, Acura. You should have just put a little rocker here so that I could adjust the climate. The other big annoyance here is cup holders. There are none. There are actually some. You see this little slot here. There is sort of an attachment that you put on here, sort of like how they have in the Miata. It gives you 2 cup holders, but I've heard that it will very much intrude into your passenger space if you want to put that there. And the reason why I don't have it installed is because Acura didn't give it to me, so I have no idea how it works for holding cups. There is this area right here behind the shifter. Interestingly enough, if you just kind of wedge a bottle in here, it does stick. Really, even though this isn't technically a cup holder, it does work. Very surprising. There's another area right here where you can put your cell phone, and there is this little lid storage place that does have a USB if you want to plug in your phone for Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, which this car does have to alleviate some of its technology issues on the infotainment. There's also this little slot here that's pretty much perfect for a phone on the door, although there are no big door pockets. So this interior, very nice, very livable, very comfortable for a supercar. It's still pretty difficult to get in and out, but without cup holders and with this infotainment, it edges close to being a perfect livable supercar, but it falls just short. Just like, as we're about to find out, the trunk. Much like the interior goes almost the way to making this car incredibly practical and comfortable, the trunk almost makes it practical. It's only got 4.4 cubic feet of storage. What more do you expect on a supercar? A 911 doesn't have a lot. An Audi R8 doesn't have a lot either. But this car has some unique issues that you have to deal with. It will fit golf clubs, which is pretty important. You will have to use a smaller bag, as I've been told by people who golf, but you can sort of wedge it in there. There is this big gap from the center mounted exhaust. That's a little bit of an issue. But the biggest issue here is that the engine lives right there and the exhaust lives right under it. So it does tend to get a little bit warm back here. Don't use the NSX for transporting ice cream. All right, so before we go and wrap up, let's go ahead and talk about how much you are going to pay for this 2019 Acura NSX in this lovely shade of Casino White Pearl. $157,500 is going to be your starting price, about $1,500 more than it was in 2018, although you do get a lot for your money, including that amazing stereo, the power seats, the parking sensors, which you are really going to need, and they actually failed me. I pulled a little bit too close to the curb in this car. I'm very sorry, Acura. Although this car does have quite a few options, bringing the price well above that $157,500 number. Casino White Pearl, $700. I like it, but it's not the first color I would choose. I'd probably go for blue or that new thermal orange for 2019. That is a wickedly cool color. We've got the carbon fiber exterior sport package with the carbon fiber engine cover out back. $12,600. Acura, you're nuts. No thanks. I won't be taking that. You've got the carbon fiber roof for $600. Again, cool, but I don't think I would do it. You've got the carbon fiber rear deck lid spoiler out there. I actually think that looks kind of cool for $3,000. We've got the carbon ceramic rotors for $10,600. That is a ton of money to spend for carbon ceramic brakes, but this is a performance car, so maybe you should go for that. We have the signature Y-spoke wheels, which don't cost any extra. I think these are the best wheels on the NSX, so don't bother spending any money to upgrade. We also have the base Sport Contact 6 tires. They're great. I wouldn't recommend upgrading to the Pirellis unless you're going to track this constantly. We have the semi-aniline blue indigo leather with Alcantara. That's standard, but we do have the interior carbon fiber package with the Alcantara headliner for $3,800. It's not that expensive. It does make this interior look a little bit sportier, and the Alcantara headliner is nice, so I probably would get that. And Sirius Satellite, I'm amazed that just isn't standard, but that's $500. So as tested, this car is about $194,700 plus an $1,800 destination fee. That is really close to base McLaren territory, and I recommend cutting down on a few of those options, trying to keep this car at around the $170,000 mark. But if you go in right now, you'll probably get a huge discount because they aren't exactly selling these like hotcakes right now. All right, so let's wrap up our time with the Acura NSX. What is this car, the new sports car experience? How does it measure up to other cars in the class, like the Audi R8, the Porsche 911, the McLaren 570S? Well, it sits below them in terms of price, so that is a plus. But it doesn't necessarily provide the same sound, which is a little disappointing from the V6, as those cars. So if you really just want to show off in it, it's not the type of car that you can rev, but compared to a 911, 911s just blend in everywhere. This is an extremely rare car. They only sell a couple hundred of these a year, so it's rare that you're gonna see another one of these at your local Cars and Coffee. So if you want to be different and unique, this is definitely the car to do it in. A McLaren is probably as unique and probably as comfortable and livable, but much more expensive. Even a base McLaren is going to start you well over $200,000. So this car's starting price at about $150 is pretty darn good. This NSX uses the best, the absolute pinnacle of what's available in 2019, just as the NSX did in the early 90s. Therefore, I think it can be deemed as a success. It is a new sports car experience. That being said, this car is designed to be as livable as a supercar can possibly be, and it gets about 8/10 of the way there. The trunk is pretty small, but there's really no getting around that with all the hybrid battery and packaging and stuff like that. But the trunk gets hot, so that's not exactly the best car to use every day. So with that being said, I think this car does an excellent job competing against those rivals that I mentioned, but there are one or two things that I would change about it. So that is why it earns a score of great buy. And if you've liked this review and you'd like to see more, subscribe to the CarBuzz YouTube channel and be sure to download our apps on iOS and Android to see all of the latest and greatest in automotive news and to see more reviews just like this one. Hope you've enjoyed the video. See you next time.